Hello, Dr. Coates.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Tessy. Hi.
It's so lovely to finally have some time with you on Zoom o'clock.
Yeah, I know. It's a great honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, for the people who do not know Dr. Coates yet, Tom, is that we're living all in very, very turbulent times, scary times, really, where people are home under lockdown, or we have other people who are outside working, our nurses and doctors, and other service personnel, which we obviously were very grateful for their services. But Tom and his family have been dealing with infectious diseases such as this one for decades. But obviously, I don't know much about it, and I'd rather hear all of this from Dr. Coates. Tom, please, would you let us know a little bit more about your work?
Yeah, so wonderful. Thank you. It basically mostly revolves around my father's company, which is called Helperby Therapeutics. It's a very small biotech that's been working on mostly bacteria and bacterial infections for the last 18 years. And he's got a background in tuberculosis, which is a very interesting bacterial infection in that it takes 6 months of treatment to cure it. It's the master survivor of bacteria. And you've got to use combinations to treat it because you get resistance otherwise. And so he went from that approach to looking at some of the new resistant bacteria that are coming through, these superbugs that everyone's sort of heard of for the last 5, 10, 15 years. And he's been working on them with combinations. So that's quite a new approach to look at common bacteria with combinations. And he's got a couple of drugs in clinical trials for that, which are very interesting in their own right. But with regards to COVID, when this first came out, he realized that most people seem to be focusing on the vaccines and also for these things called new chemical entities, which are brand new drugs. And they're both going to work. Probably one of them will probably work in the long term, but that's going to miss out everyone who's currently affected now. Really, they're not going to be in trials, or not going to be fully rolled out. I don't think before the end of this year. So his thought was that we need to have something that's urgently that can be available immediately, and that means that you've got to use old drugs. And using combinations of old drugs means that you have a better chance of them working well, because one bit of a drug roughly does something quite well. One bit of another roughly does something quite well. Together they work superbly in other fields. And for HIV, they've been using combinations for years. So he thought that was a sensible approach, and we've got a combination that's we're trying to get a clinical trial up and running hopefully later this month. So we're looking for funding for that. We've got onto the UK government's coronavirus therapeutics task force shortlist. We found that out today, which is encouraging.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But we will see where this goes. But I think it's a sort of a pragmatic approach. I think that's the way we're viewing it. A pragmatic interim approach. It won't necessarily be the end game, but it's a good way to prop up the healthcare systems in the short term, I think.
Very interesting. So you were talking about combinations then. When you're saying, for example, we have multicultural societies, and we have been talking about that offline already, and that was really interesting for me. So, do you think that by using combinations, it would then apply to a more broader population? Because obviously, when you're creating, such as for example HIV/AIDS, you have antiretroviral medicines, but they're not all the same because the virus depends as well, depending on the geographical location. So is that the same for this one, you think? Will that?
No. Okay, so so the interesting thing about combinations so far is that they've been used to combat resistance arising. So they evolve into different species. So different, they're called clades in HIV. They evolve almost into different subspecies of the HIV virus itself, and that means that you need to use different combinations to treat each different subspecies, really, of clade. And again, same for TB. So they evolve resistance and they change. COVID actually seems to be fairly stable, which is nice. That's at least one thing that could be said for it, is that if it was evolving as fast as HIV or some of the other viruses, we would have more of a problem, I think, maybe.
So for the evolving one, sorry for interrupting you, but for that train of thought, so when you're saying evolving by HIV/AIDS and by TB, for example, you saw from the beginning that it was quite changing all the time already?
So I think for TB, one of the first clinical trials, by the end of the trial, the tuberculosis was resistant or partly resistant to the drug that they'd been using. So that's how quickly it could occur for that. And HIV, similarly, resistance would occur pretty quickly. And they started off with one drug, then they added a second, and I think the typical courses are at least 3 or 4 in combination. So the precedent is for combination therapies because of resistance, and if you're a bug, it's much harder to defend against 4 threats and evolve spontaneously in 4 different directions. It's much easier if you've only got one thing to deal with at a time. So for us, for Helperby Therapeutics, this approach is a bit different. Instead of dealing with resistance, before COVID, our bacterial interest was to do with resistance. So that's why combinations are valuable there. But for COVID, another aspect is not just effectiveness to deal with resistance, but also speed. Obviously you can screen all existing drugs and see if they work a little bit, but the problem is that they may only work a little bit. So what you want to do is try and get all of those little bits that might work together and add them together, and hopefully something can actually treat this thing, because we don't have a proper treatment yet. They've licensed Resmidivir from Gilead, I think on some form of emergency measures in the US. But the latest trial said it was safe mostly. It reduced the duration of it reduced the duration of recovery, which is encouraging. It suggests it is doing something, but it didn't change the rate of death statistically. So a little bit of that and a little bit of some of the other things, I think it's a good chance of a better chance of working than just depending on one thing at a time. So there are other companies doing combinations as well, and I think this kind of hedging the bets is a good idea. Devoting yourself just to one, I think is a risky strategy.
So talking about just before, I want to obviously hear more about your company specifically. But before that, can I ask you 2 questions of things that have been circulating around as rumors? One thing that, which my partner is excited about, that nicotine, for example, helps with the treatment. Exactly, that's what I said. But it has been circulating actually that people are doing trials on that, which I think is ridiculous.
Are they genuinely doing trials?
Yes, well, it has been in the papers last week. So.
Okay, but okay, I haven't seen that. The thing is, these develop so quickly. I may very well have missed it, and it may be whatever. But yeah.
There's also the one that, and there's also in Luxembourg. Actually, I heard about that the rheuma that they use for rheuma, so like arthritis, to treat that there's also some correlation for some help relief for COVID.
Yeah, I mean so rheumatoid arthritis is an inflammatory disease where the body's immune system basically behaves badly and decides that it doesn't like parts of its own body, and goes about and damages them, and that hydroxychloroquine. That's one of the drugs that has once been used for rheumatoid arthritis as well as malaria, and that's actually one of the ingredients in our combination. So there is an element of immune modulation that needs to be attended to for treating COVID, because that's one of the major issues in a small proportion of people. The immune system just goes very, very wrong, and a lot of the damage we think in some people is being caused by the immune system itself. So looking to drugs that already exist, to immune modulators, might be a sensible approach. But again, if you're only treating with immune modulators and not an antiviral, my concern might be that you open the door for the virus to expand even further and cause more direct damage rather than indirect damage from the immune system. So I would be interested to see how the trials go, but I personally would not. I would be more comfortable if the trials were in conjunction with an antiviral.
So talking about that then, so tell me a little bit more about the next steps then for your specific research and your trial. How long do you think you will take for a product to be out? And also when you're talking about funding, how maybe share as well, how can people get even in touch with you? How can we find you? And,
So details are on our website, which is helperby.com, which is HELPERBY.com. We are looking for private investors because we think that the private sector can respond a little bit faster sometimes than the government, potentially. But I think we do remain committed to working with the government to some degree as well, in part because there's an element of preparedness as well that needs to go into working to prevent or mitigate the next epidemic. So this may be a one-off, but it might not be. And I think we were unprepared for this one as a global healthcare system, and individual governments will be interested in making sure they're more ready for this next time around, and part of that might be to get a lot of different combinations prepared, tested, and safe to use in the right doses, maybe stockpiled or maybe just ready to manufacture, and then they can sort of specifically screen them when the next virus comes out, sort of the disease X type thing. And that would be much cheaper than developing new drugs for an unknown target. So for Helperby, we're looking forward to starting a trial later this month in Eastern Europe, where we've got an existing trial site and relationships. And after starting, we would hope to have some publishable results after about 3 months, and I think full results after 6. So that's the time.
That's amazing.
But these drugs are already on the market. People take them in millions of doses around the world already. Probably not in the exact combination that we're trying, but so when I used to work as a doctor, we would have patients who had 20, 30 medications, all taking them at the same time.
Oh, wow.
No, I mean, you've got several diseases, and you take medications for several diseases, and There are some known interactions that you need to avoid, but by and large, anyone with more than a few drugs um, is a unique trial. They'll probably have never been published with that particular combination. It's not, doctors are pragmatic at solving problems. They do deal with a lot of uncertainty, and they just try and work in the patient's best interests, and that's not necessarily waiting for a clinical trial with 20 specific drugs. That those trials have not happened yet. Medical science has not caught up with reality yet.
Well, thank you so much. Our time has run out. I make sure, I know it just flies. I make sure that I put your bio and also the website and all of the information below the YouTube. And of course, people can contact me directly as well for you. I think what you're doing is really incredible, very admirable, very timely. So I'm really, really was an honor to talk to you, because I know you're very busy at this moment in time.
Thank you for making the time too as well.
Congratulations again for being chosen as one of the task force participants for the UK government.
Sorry, shortlist. Yeah.
Okay, so well, all the best to make it to the end. And then do you have anything else to share, just as a kind of like a key takeaway for everyone listening at the moment on their lockdown in their living rooms?
Things will get better. I think that the medical community is there, and it's thinking of new ideas, and it will hopefully come to a good solution that works for all of us, and can be spread around the world, and take care of the most vulnerable.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank
Cheerio.
you, Tom.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.